disappeared. It's what people do. The sooner you learn that lesson, the better. That's a horrible way to start it.
Rachel Zegler has just discovered that Disney is preparing yet another revival of Snow White, and, unsurprisingly, she is furious. The news comes after the dramatic reaction and disastrous box office collapse of the last attempt, which lost nearly $115 million. You would assume that Disney, bruised and battered by the fallout, might tread carefully this time. Yet the fuse has already been lit, and Rachel, never one to keep silent, has responded with a mixture of teasing jabs, pointed remarks, and outright fury. Behind the scenes, her frustration has boiled into a storm of hint-laden chaos. She claims the next revival could unravel everything, perhaps even blowing apart the fragile remains of her association with the project. To understand how the situation spiraled into this, we need to step back to where it all began. Disney's troubles with Snow White trace back to October 2016, when the studio, riding a wave of live-action remakes, boldly announced its plans for a new adaptation of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The move was loud, ambitious, and drenched in optimism. Screenwriter Erin Cressida Wilson was brought on to shape the script, celebrated for making bold creative decisions. The musical element was set to sparkle with the help of Benj Posek and Justin Paul, the award-winning duo behind La La Land and The Greatest Showman. Expectations skyrocketed. After all, what could possibly go wrong when you combine talking forest animals, glittering musical numbers, and the timeless fairy tale that launched Disney's empire? In May 2019, the studio pushed forward with the announcement that Mark Webb, best known for the Amazing Spider-Man films, would direct. This decision left fans both intrigued and confused. A man associated with superhero spectacle was now tasked with reimagining a delicate fairy tale about innocence, envy, and magical mirrors. While many were skeptical about whether Webb's style could blend with such material, production pressed ahead, unbothered by the questions swirling around. By June of that year, optimism returned briefly. Then in 2021, the internet lit up when Disney revealed its casting choice. Rachel Zegler, the breakout star of West Side Story, was chosen to step into Snow White's legendary shoes. The announcement spread rapidly across Twitter, igniting both excitement and controversy. Zegler's formidable voice and strong screen presence seemed promising, but many wondered if she could shoulder the legacy of one of Disney's most iconic characters. The project gained even more attention later that November, when Gal Gadot, fresh off her reign as Wonder Woman, was cast as the Evil Queen. Her casting was met with widespread intrigue. The idea of Gadot trading her superhero armor for a floor-length coat and sinister smiles promised a deliciously menacing performance. Gadot herself expressed her excitement at stepping into a villain's shoes for the first time, embracing the opportunity to twist her heroic image into something darker. Another major surprise arrived in 2022 when Disney revealed that this version of Snow White would not include Prince Charming at all. Instead of the traditional romantic hero, the studio opted for a Robin Hood-inspired figure, portrayed by Andrew Burnap, signaling their intent to shake up the formula. The bold change generated mixed reactions, but before the public could fully digest it, production faced its first real setback. Just as filming was about to gain momentum in March 2022, a fire broke out on set. Fortunately, no one was injured, but the damage was serious enough to delay the schedule. Despite this disruption, the project managed to move forward, and filming stretched into July 2022. By then, the production had grown in scale, featuring elaborate sets, dramatic lighting, and the heavy use of green screen effects to conjure Disney's trademark sense of magic. For a brief moment, it looked as if the film might finally be nearing completion. Yet the optimism was short-lived. Early test screenings revealed an alarming truth: audiences weren't impressed. The film was not landing as expected, forcing Disney back to the drawing board. By June 2023, the cast and crew were called in again for reshoots, a costly attempt to salvage the project. Then came another controversy, this time sparked by Peter Dinklage. The Emmy-winning actor publicly criticized Disney for its outdated portrayal of the Seven Dwarfs, calling the premise backward and insensitive. His remarks quickly caught fire in the media, painting Disney as a studio that was simultaneously trying to appear progressive while clinging to problematic stereotypes. In response, the studio pivoted once more, announcing that the dwarfs would now be reimagined as magical creatures, conjured largely through CGI. Yet this solution hardly solved the problem. Many members of the dwarfism community spoke out, calling it a missed opportunity for real representation. Disney's attempt to sidestep criticism instead invited even more of it. At the same time, Rachel Zegler herself became a lightning rod for debate. The announcement of her casting had already sparked divided reactions. Supporters applauded it as a long overdue step toward greater diversity in a story that had remained frozen in its 1937 form for far too long. Others, clinging to the traditional image of Snow White, saw the change as another instance of Disney rewriting history to satisfy modern cultural pressures. The arguments multiplied, often for reasons that had little to do with the actual character or film, but rather with broader debates about identity, tradition, and representation. Through it all, Zegler defended her role with passion. She emphasized the importance of representation and spoke about how much the character resonated with Spanish-speaking cultures, expressing her excitement at bringing new life to such a beloved figure. Yet for some, her words were inspiring, while for others they came across as dismissive or even condescending. Whether you applauded her or cringed at her interviews, one thing became clear: the drama surrounding Snow White was far from over. And if anyone thought the casting controversies were the peak of the chaos, they were sorely mistaken. The real storm, however, began in 2022 when Rachel Zegler, in an early interview, referred to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs as antiquated. The reaction was immediate and fierce. Traditional Disney fans across the globe seemed to gasp in unison, horrified at hearing the studio's new leading lady dismiss the original 1937 classic. Zegler doubled down, adding that the entire concept of a prince swooping in to save a helpless princess was outdated, even absurd. "It's not 1937 anymore," she insisted. "We wrote a Snow White who will not be rescued by a prince. Her goal is to become a leader." To some, this perspective was refreshing, even invigorating, a necessary evolution of a fairy tale for a new era. But to others, it was nothing short of blasphemy, a deliberate dismantling of one of Disney's most cherished legacies. What was meant as empowerment quickly became a cultural flashpoint. And then, just when it seemed the controversies might settle, the situation escalated further. In August 2024, shortly after the teaser trailer dropped, Zegler posted 2 words and 2 images on her social media: "Free Palestine." The post ignited a wildfire. On one side, many praised her for speaking up and expressing solidarity with Palestinians. But the context was combustible. Her co-star, Gal Gadot, had long been openly pro-Israel, and the contrasting positions between the two women turned the film into an unexpected geopolitical battleground. Calls for boycotts erupted almost immediately, and comment sections on every promotional post transformed into all-out war zones. Fans weren't just debating the film anymore, they were arguing over history, politics, morality, and identity, using every new screenshot or promotional still as ammunition. The tension only intensified when Rachel's old tweets resurfaced. In them, she had harshly criticized former US President Donald Trump and mocked his supporters in pointed, unforgiving terms. What might have once been brushed off as youthful candor now became fuel for another cycle of backlash. Social media erupted again, with factions forming, some defending her right to speak her mind, others accusing her of arrogance, and still others calling for her outright cancellation. Posts were shared, reposted, dissected, and weaponized, each side convinced the other was either hopelessly naive or dangerously hostile. By November 2024, the strain became impossible to ignore. Rachel released a public statement, part apology, part plea. She admitted her faults, her fissures, and her pauses, acknowledging that her passion sometimes burned hotter than her diplomacy. "I can only hope," she said, "that despite my imperfections, people will still line up to see the work I've poured myself into." It was a message both vulnerable and defensive, attempting to soften her critics while reminding audiences of her dedication. Yet whether it would be enough to salvage the project, or her own reputation, remained deeply uncertain. Rachel maintained that she had no intention of hurting anybody and insisted she only longed for a bit of tranquility. Yet by the time those words were spoken, the damage was already done. The atmosphere on set had become heavy with rumors, stories whispered on the street and amplified in the press, many of them entirely untrue but damaging nonetheless. Behind the cameras, tension between Rachel and Gal Gadot was impossible to ignore. While Rachel was voicing her frustrations publicly, Gal had spoken out in favor of Palestine, while at the same time identifying herself openly as a Jewish woman, stating bluntly that her people had endured enough hatred. This divergence in tone and perspective made their relationship appear strained, if not fractured. Journalists quickly picked up on the cracks, noting that the rift between the two stars was not just political but personal, and that Disney, under mounting pressure, even had to consider whether additional protection for Gal was necessary after a wave of threats began reaching the studio.
Still have party girl voice because I love to talk to people. I haven't talked to other people in front of my face in a very long time. I'm taking advantage of that.
By this stage, Disney's press strategy was in full damage control mode. The promotional schedule revealed the fractures, individual press engagements for each actress, no joint stage appearances, and certainly no smiling camaraderie on a Hollywood sofa. The arrangement said it all. They were clearly not Disney pals. The marketing team scrambled with desperate energy, flooding inboxes with press emails, cutting trailers with increasingly frantic edits, and even stationing virtual babysitters across Rachel's social media platforms, monitoring her posts like hawks in case another controversy flared. The publicity campaign grew clumsier by the week. Audiences sensed it during the rare joint appearances that did occur, each one tense and stilted, as though watching a family try to make small talk at dinner after an unresolved political argument. The unease bled into the rollout itself. On March 21, 2025, Snow White finally premiered in cinemas across the United States and Canada. The opening weekend numbers told their own bleak story, a domestic haul of only $40.2 million, a figure that fell far short of projections. Overseas markets contributed roughly $45 million, bringing the global opening weekend to just over $85 million, hardly the magical fairytale Disney had envisioned. The math was merciless. With a production budget estimated between $240 and $270 million, and a massive marketing campaign on top, the film was already at a loss. By early April, the numbers had barely improved. Domestic earnings crawled to $71.4 million, while international sales reached $75.8 million. Together, the worldwide total stood at $147.2 million, a figure that, far from breaking even, confirmed that Disney's latest live-action experiment had become one of its most expensive disappointments. The release of Snow White quickly revealed itself as more than just a box office disappointment. It was a global misstep, with Disney facing an estimated $115 million financial setback. In the aftermath, Rachel Zegler tried to step up to the challenge, though not always with the poise of a seasoned professional. When critics and audiences weren't exactly charmed, she attempted to frame the response positively. "It's very gratifying to work so hard," she said, explaining that the film demanded immense effort, and she believed that love infused both her performance and the work of the creative team. She acknowledged that not everyone was embracing the new version, but insisted the film still had heart. Her defense was earnest and commendable, yet it highlighted the divide between intention and reception. What audiences received wasn't merely a refreshed take on a classic. It felt, to many, like the story had undergone a personality transplant. Rachel herself spoke about filmmaking as a collaborative process, a shared attempt to create something timeless, and emphasized that everyone involved had given their best. But the sting of watching such a massive production collapse under its own ambition was undeniable. After all, when you endure the poisoned apple, don the crown, and take on the weight of a legendary role, only for the project to fail, yes, it hurts. The reviews painted a dismal picture. Rotten Tomatoes gave the film a lackluster 42%, based on 215 reviews, with an average score hovering around 5.2 out of 10. Critics generally agreed that Zegler herself was fantastic, yet the movie lacked clarity in its purpose. Was it trying to be a feminist reimagining, a sweeping musical, a manifesto, or a CGI-heavy fever dream? No one could quite decide, and the confusion undercut whatever strengths it did have. Metacritic echoed this with a middling score of 50 out of 100, while audiences, though not outright hostile, weren't celebrating either. CinemaScore delivered a B+, decent, but nowhere near the glowing response Disney had banked on. The irony was sharp. Rachel's performance earned praise, but the sweeping changes to the original story alienated viewers. Instead of Snow White singing sweetly to the birds, she was suddenly positioned as the figurehead of a revolution. It was bold, but baffling to audiences who weren't sure what they were supposed to feel. And in Hollywood, when a film of this magnitude flops, the ripple effects are brutal. One failure bleeds into the prospects of the next project, and the shadow of disappointment begins to linger over everything that follows. In the wake of Snow White's collapse, Disney quietly began applying the brakes to its next big projects. The live-action adaptation of Tangled, which had already lined up Michael Gracey as director and Jennifer Caitlin Robinson as writer, suddenly found itself in limbo. What had once been promoted as Rapunzel's next great cinematic moment now seems to be indefinitely on hold. The failure of one film had made Disney anxious, but this was never just about Snow White. The entire future of the studio's live-action pipeline began to wobble, hinging on how upcoming titles like Lilo and Stitch and Moana would perform. Of these, Lilo and Stitch is carrying especially high stakes. The remake is essentially a pressure cooker, overseen by Dean Fleischer-Camp, the filmmaker who turned Marcel the Shell with Shoes On into a critical darling. Disney hopes that his quirky sensibility, combined with the emotional weight of the 2002 classic, can deliver something heartfelt, messy, and universal enough to tug at audiences' emotions. Scheduled to open on May 23, 2025, the film has been loaded with expectation. More than just another remake, it represents a test of whether Disney can still recapture the magic of its animated library in live action, or whether Snow White's failure was a warning sign that the formula has expired. Casting news has generated optimism. Maya Kealoha, stepping into Lilo's sandals, has already charmed fans with her look, energy, and spark, the kind of chaotic but endearing presence needed to balance Stitch's cosmic mischief. Sydney Agudong has been cast as Nani, while Kahia Machado is taking on the role of David, the laid-back surfer whose awkward romantic persistence with Nani has always provided gentle humor. The biggest sigh of relief for longtime fans, however, came with confirmation that Chris Sanders, the original co-creator and voice of Stitch, would return to voice the character. As many pointed out, no one else could quite capture that strange blend of growling, purring, and squealing chaos. The supporting cast adds further range and credibility. Zach Galifianakis is bringing his trademark oddball charm as the bumbling Jumba, while Billy Magnussen is set to deliver as Pleakley, the perpetually confused alien bureaucrat. Courtney B. Vance rounds out the cast as Cobra Bubbles, the intimidating but ultimately tender-hearted social worker whose presence grounds the story in real-world stakes. Altogether, the ensemble suggests that Disney has assembled a careful mix of comedic timing, emotional heft, and nostalgic callbacks, precisely the elements needed to rescue its live-action strategy from the shadow of Snow White. Filming Lilo and Stitch was not without its challenges. While Disney had wisely chosen Hawaii as the primary location in order to preserve the authentic island atmosphere, real life quickly complicated the plan. The lingering effects of COVID-19, combined with industrial strikes, repeatedly disrupted production. Still, against the odds, filming was completed by March 2024. Now, as Stitch and Lilo surf toward their release date, a new wave of Disney's live-action ambitions is forming, and it carries with it strong echoes of Moana. The live-action Moana was officially announced in April 2023 and has been scheduled for release on July 10, 2026, under the direction of Thomas Kail. Expectations are already enormous. Kail, known for his theatrical precision and bold staging, is expected to bring a sense of passion and visual flair to the adaptation. Casting decisions have only fueled anticipation. Catherine Lagarea, of Samoan descent, has been selected to play Moana, and the choice has been widely praised for its cultural authenticity. Fans are convinced she embodies the role so thoroughly that even something as simple as her walking slowly along the beach in a trailer could move audiences to tears. But the true tidal wave of excitement surrounds Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's return as Maui. His charisma, humor, and musical presence were defining features of the animated original, and the prospect of him reprising the role has become the project's biggest selling point. Few actors can command the screen in the way Johnson does, and his return ensures continuity between the animated classic and its live-action reinterpretation. Rumors about new or reimagined songs have already sparked speculation among fans, with many expecting them to strike the same uplifting, motivational tone that made the original soundtrack iconic. The supporting cast further deepens the cultural grounding of the film. John Tui has joined the ensemble, while Frankie Adams is set to portray Chief Tui, Moana's father. Rebecca Randall will play Sina, Moana's mother, and Rena Owen has been cast as Grandma Tala, the beloved spirit guide character whose warmth and wisdom remain at the heart of the story. With such casting and direction in place, Moana looks poised to deliver not just another Disney remake, but a production steeped in cultural reverence and blockbuster ambition we all secretly wish we had a grandmother like Tala. In August 2024, production on Moana officially began, with filming split between Hawaii and Atlanta. The Hawaiian locations ensured the story's Polynesian roots would be treated with cultural respect, while Atlanta's studios provided the infrastructure needed for the more elaborate sets and effects. Disney signaled its commitment to authenticity by incorporating traditional dance and music into the film, and the return of Lin-Manuel Miranda to the soundtrack only heightened excitement. His ability to craft anthems that blend cultural specificity with universal emotion set a striking contrast against Snow White, which had struggled to find any musical identity at all. The ambition of live-action Moana extends beyond recreating its animated predecessor. It aims to dig deeper into themes of identity, cultural heritage, environmental preservation, and self-discovery. With such a talented lineup on board, expectations could not be higher. Yet the lingering question remains,